Welcome again to Thinking Through Autonomy. Today, we're with Bonny Simi, president of JetBlue Technology Ventures out in San Carlos, California. We'll be talking about her portfolio, including investments in urban air mobility, micro-weather forecasting, and hybrid aircraft technology. We're also going to discuss her incredible personal journey that starts on a luge track in Lake Placid, spans an Olympic career that includes bobsledding, and of course, time in the cockpit of one of the world's most advanced commercial airliners. All this and more in our episode today. So as they say, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Thinking Through Autonomy, a podcast to help you understand the promise and impact of autonomous land and air vehicles in our world. I'm Ken Dunlap, managing partner of Catalyst Go, taking you on this journey. Hear and read more at thinkingthroughautonomy.com. Now it's time to take your hands off the wheel, foot off the pedal, hand off that throttle, and let's go. Bonny, I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here on Thinking Through Autonomy. Welcome.
Thank you, and I'm really excited to join you, especially since I'm speaking with, a fellow aviator.
And in fact, two aviators who worked at the same company who have not run across each other after all these years. So it's kind of like making an old family connection, isn't it?
It is. But, as somebody said, why are you still flying? And I said, once a pilot, always a pilot. So we're all still pilots, and we're all still part of the family.
Yeah, and sometimes I alter that to say I'm a recovering pilot too. But that is for a different podcast, I think. Old pilots and what they used to do. But Bonny, I just want to jump into things, and I want to talk about your personal investment strategy. Now, the first investment you made that appeared in the New York Times was frankly for not a lot of money. And I don't know if you remember that article, but the article was called Bonnie Warner's $8 Investment Matures. And it was written by legendary sports writer Frank Litzy. And I understand this $8 that you invested in yourself was for injury insurance when you went to luge school at Lake Placid. Tell me about this $8 and where it ranks among all these wonderful investments that you're doing.
Yeah, that's funny, because when you were talking about my personal investing strategy, I thought this was about JetBlue Technology Ventures. And then, yes, I actually do remember that investment that I made way back in, that would be in 1980. So it was I was in college, and I had taken a semester off, and I was in Lake Placid for the 1980 Olympics as a torchbearer. And I was a starving college kid at the time. And once the Olympics ended, I had like a month with nothing to do before school started again, and no money to do it with, basically. And then I saw this luge camp that was in Lake Placid for people who wanted to try luge, and it only cost $8, and that was for the insurance. It was a free camp, and then the $8 was for the insurance. And the local town, a lot of folks were taking in athletes, so I had free housing at a local hotel, and I said, sure, I'll try that. Why not? If there hadn't been that luge camp and I hadn't signed up for it and my little $8 investment, I'm not sure if I'd even be here today, because it started and kicked off a career for me. I had planned as a young kid, I'd always wanted to be in the Olympics, and ultimately it led to I made the Olympic team 4 years later. And then into a broadcasting career, which was also something I had said that I wanted to do when I was a kid. And then the broadcasting career gave me enough money to earn my pilot's license, which is also something that I had said that I wanted to do when I was a kid. So I had this little list of things I wanted to do, and one thing kind of led to the other, and eventually I got into aviation. So I have to say, in the spirit of startups, I pivoted many times, but that initial investment has paid off very well.
Bonny, as I understand it, your daughter has followed you into luge, and I'm just wondering, what kind of advice do you give to young athletes like your daughter about achieving excellence? Because I have to think that what you do in sports, or that initial thing that you do as you put your feet down and start your professional career, follows you the whole way. So do you give your daughter luge advice that would happen to help out when she becomes the next CEO of JetBlue Ventures?
So yes, my daughter, she actually discovered the sport without me. We had moved to Park City because I was working for JetBlue's Salt Lake City call center at the time, and they literally in her junior high school had after school luge, and so she got involved in it through that. Although she has since retired at the ripe age of 17, she went on to college, which I'm quite happy with. But when she started it, I always say people, if you're interested in things and kids have dreams, and she just wanted to do it because it was fun, and I supported that. But for those who have dreams, it's just take one step at a time. Don't think it's the same thing for people who want to become pilots. It's the same thing for people who want to get into other parts of careers or entrepreneurs. Just you got to take that first step, and maybe then and plan maybe two steps ahead. You have the big vision. I want to be in the Olympics. I want to be a pilot. I want to be in broadcast television or whatever it may be. But what are those first steps? And when I grew up as a little kid, I grew up in a small mountain town. We didn't have any money. My mother was a disabled single mom, disabled school teacher. So, the economics of the family were not conducive to things like becoming a pilot or any of that kind of stuff, but or becoming Olympian. And when I came home from school one day as a teenager, said I want to be an Olympian someday. My mother didn't say you can't afford that. That's impossible. You're crazy, or any of those things that normal people would say. What she said is, "Oh, okay. Well, how are you going to do it? What's your first step?" And so, you know, my daughter first step was to take luge from down near the bottom, going down 3 turns, and then the next thing was to master 4 turns, then 5 turns, and work her way up. And as a pilot, people who say, hey, I want to get my pilot's license, I said, just go take 3 lessons. After 3 lessons are achievable for anybody. After 3 lessons, you then can decide if being a pilot or getting a license is something achievable that you want to do. So it is take that first step, plan it out, and then just keep moving in that same direction. Have those long-term, and you can call them goals. I actually call them dream goals. And the difference is, a goal, often people feel that they have to map out a full path of it. A dream goal is one where it's that North Star. It's that thing that's in the distance that you're always kind of pointing towards, and you keep working your way towards it. Just keep taking, one step forward, and sometimes it'll be 2 steps back. And when I started Luge, and then I, went my first international trip, I was training with the Germans, and I crashed every run for 52 runs in a row, and I thought I was crazy and I was going to quit the sport. And then the coaches started helping me. So, 2 steps back, and then 3 steps forward. And in 4 years, I was beating the Germans. So, you just got to keep taking steps forward and have that North Star as a dream goal.
And you also had the $8 of insurance, so you were pretty protected on all of those crashes, I would imagine. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about JetBlue Technology Ventures. You're the president, but you're also something else that's very unique, and that you're the founding force of JetBlue Technology Ventures. And I'm wondering, when you put this idea together and you brought it back to the bosses at JetBlue corporate headquarters, what kind of response did you get when you first pitched this idea?
Well, this actually was a vision, I have to say, at the very top of JetBlue. And we, the chairman of the board, he was one of the, founding members of the board way back when, Joel Peterson. He's a entrepreneurship professor at Stanford. There were several other venture capitalists on the board and such, and visionaries who were thinking, JetBlue's a very innovative company. That's in our DNA. It's kind of how we are wired. But we're 15 years old at that time, and it's easy then to just focus on what we do well, which is fly airplanes safely from point A to point B and deliver excellent service. But we're a 5% player in the U.S. domestic market. You've got United American, Delta, Southwest, each owning roughly 20% of the market. So that's 80%, and the rest of us have the rest. And if you're a 5% player, it's tough to see how you might be around in 50 years. So the board is like, let's think about JetBlue in a broader sense. Just like think about Disney. It started out as a cartoon and a mouse and a movie, and now it's an entire entertainment company, and you think about JetBlue and the amazing service we do, and if we think about JetBlue as a travel company more broadly than just as an airline, How do you do that? How do you think about it's a different set of skill set, and it's a different way of thinking of innovation from the outside in. And so it was really the board that came back to JetBlue and the management team and leaders and said, look, we want you to think about innovation from the outside in. Go figure that out, and set up whatever you think is the right path to do that. And at the time, I was head of talent and did a lot of work with our leadership team. And I'm from Silicon Valley. I've been resident here for a very long time. And I suggested that it should be a corporate venture capital firm. And that's the interesting thing at innovative companies like JetBlue. If you say, hey, I've got an idea, they'll say, great, go do it. So I raised my hand and they said, fabulous, go figure it out. So I headed west, which is kind of the my home stomping ground, and with a clean sheet. It was very much just go figure it out, and I spent a lot of time interviewing a lot of other venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, corporate venture capitalists, what works, what doesn't, Stanford professors, and others, and really mapped out what ultimately has become, and it just got featured in some business school case studies as the right way to do corporate venture. And so we kind of framed it up and just follow that path. And here we are 4 years later. We've got 25 investments. Although we don't publicize the amount of our investments or the progress, let's just say our startups are doing very well. And as an investment, at least at this point, we have very significant positive trends with our startups. So it's a long game. So we'll see, 7 to 10 years if there's financial returns in terms of the exits of these startups. But really, this is more about making JetBlue better as an airline, and also thinking about JetBlue more broadly as a travel company as we partner with some of the other subsidiaries within JetBlue. And so we're kind of that innovation engine that surfaces things that help keep JetBlue forward thinking.
Yet you are this startup airline, even though you're 15 years in the making. And
well, we're 20 years now. When we
20
started,
years now.
When I started JetBlue Tech Ventures, this vision was about 5 years ago. Now we're 20 years. So yeah, we're in the airline industry. We're still a startup, I guess you could say. Well, you were kind of a medium, but in the industry where the giants are almost, are at 90, 85, 90 years old. I think approaching 100. We're still a startup.
And yet, when you look at the larger aviation industry, the model you have for venture investing is really not found in too many of them. And I'm wondering, when you walked into the room with the other industry players that were there, did they look and say, oh yeah, this makes sense, or, for JetBlue to pursue this? Did your peers say, oh, maybe snicker in the background saying, oh, look at JetBlue, look at what they're trying to do? Because I think that the difference between then and now is you are like this incredible serious player when it comes to investing. And back then, what the audience needs to understand is you're doing something very radical in a very old industry set in its ways.
Yeah, the announcement way back there in early 2016. Now the industry itself, it is an older industry, a legacy industry, a lot of legacy technology, but it is an industry and always has been an industry that captures people's imagination. It does make headlines all the time, usually for good reasons, but sometimes not for good reasons. But it's a sexy industry, if you will. Aviation just always is. And yet it's a very low margin. So it's very difficult to innovate in a very low margin industry. And so that's why there hasn't been a whole lot of innovation. And so when we set up and the way we set this up, it captures people's imagination right away. But no airline really in the world was set up to do anything like this. So they're like, that's interesting. I won't say didn't pay attention to it. I think it caught. JetBlue has captured the imagination of airlines in the industry worldwide, just because of the way we operate and such. So, but I don't think they thought, maybe we should do that. It was more like, that's interesting. And there weren't a lot of naysayers, but there weren't a lot of. It was more like, that's interesting. And then people went on to do their business. Since then, over the course of time, there's a couple, there's a few airlines internationally that are have announced that they're setting up venture arms. Haven't yet seen too much progress, but they may have progress. It hasn't met the public eye just yet. So they're modeling some of the work after us. We work with a lot of we do partnerships, and so we advise a lot of airlines and actually other companies in the travel industry brought more broadly across the world. Because when we got started, people here in Silicon Valley kind of helped us figure things out, and so it's a sort of a pay it forward. So we do advise a lot. So there's more and more activity, but I do know the airline industry itself, every time we do an announcement of an investment, the startups get additional attention from the industry, because we even had one startup come to us and said when they were trying to pitch themselves to big name airline, U.S. big name airline X, that airline said to them, well, why don't you have investment from JetBlue Technology Ventures? And then that startup came to us and said, look, you're kind of the stamp of approval now in the industry, and people are asking why you aren't investing in this. And then if you do when we do invest in startups, they get a whole lot of extra attention. Yeah, even from our competitors, but we don't stop our portfolio companies from working with competitors, because we want them to be successful. But the nice thing is we're well ahead. When we invest, we have a seat at the table. That's kind of the whole point. And so we really know the inner workings of the startups and how we can best benefit JetBlue. And then if they're successful, they may deploy with other airlines as well. And we hope they do. And we raise the bar for the entire travel industry.
And I just hope it isn't a kiss of death that if someone asks, well, why hasn't JetBlue Ventures invested in you? And you say, well, we gave them the pitch and they turned away, that, there is another place for them if they have that technology. Let's just talk a little bit about some of these amazing companies that are in your portfolio. The first one that comes to mind is Climatecell. And that's a weather forecasting tool for micro weather, and it seems to have plays in urban air mobility and drone package delivery, and certainly the airline industry.
Yes.
Can you kind of share why you're attracted to this kind of technology when it seems everybody forecasts the weather. I forecast the weather and say it's raining outside. What does Climatecell bring that others don't?
Well, first of all, I think, and this is a great case study too of how we work with startups. So when we invest in early stage startups. So the startups, may be 3 people, 6 people, and then, or it could be maybe up to 20 people. So they're still fairly early often, and then we work with them and help. Maybe we'll let them use the JetBlue platform to test things out. We advise them, we guide them, and of course, like I said, once they get that stamp of approval, other people pay notice. So Climatecell is a classic example just like that. So Climatecell is founded by some gentlemen out of MIT and Harvard. One of the founders was a fighter pilot in the Israeli Defense Force, and so he very much had aviation in his mind. And aviation weather worldwide is usually provided through the government and then repackaged from various companies that enhance it or whatever. But the raw data comes from all the same place. And and to your point, why do you need somebody to tell you when it's raining when you just stand outside and you can say, oh, it's raining? Well, that's the point. If you were to look at weather, and this is particularly valuable for when we start thinking of the urban air mobility space, at airports, you know exactly what the weather is on the runways, because that's where the major weather sensors are and where the visibility is and that sort of thing in terms of ground-based weather. And you know if it's raining or not, and if it's because the tower will update what the weather is. But you don't know what the weather is a mile away at the ramp, which might be very different than what it is on the runway. And ramp operations are very important as you think about when's the lightning? Is the lightning going to happen? When is the rain going to? And as you think of kind of like looking ahead a little bit, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, when is the rain going to turn to snow? When do we need to roll the de-icing trucks? All of these things are operational decisions that ramp operations need to manage, besides the normal traditional airplanes taking off and land, which runs into kind of the national airspace and dispatchers and such. And so We met these guys, and I think there were six of them at the time when we first met them, and they had this technology. As it turns out, cell towers, so phone telephone towers, which are
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. They're
Sure.
ubiquitous around the world. The signals between cell towers, the type they attenuate differently depending on the type and intensity of weather, particularly of precipitation. So the cell companies, the data that flows off of those towers, that you can use that in real time to determine, is it raining, is it snowing, what is the intensity, is it foggy, all of this, which when you think of weather radars or weather sensors around the world, they're just not, they don't have that except for these cell signals. So these guys patented that technology, signed up, some global cell providers in various regions of the world to capitalize on that. And then they had this great technology, but again, technologists often have a hard time of like translating information into a product that can be used by consumers who are not technologists. And so they had a very big interest in, if you think about what would be the market for understanding what is the weather at on First Street versus Second Street, or on this farm plot versus that farm plot, or this parking lot versus that parking lot, or this baseball stadium versus this versus center of town. Like if you want to know the weather in Boston, all you have is the weather at Boston Airport and the general weather at Boston. You don't know what it is at Fenway Park. And so what these guys were able to do is a very, very precise local weather and forecast out 3 hours. So like, should you do is the game going to get rained out or not? Is the ramp going to get shut down for lightning or not? All of these things. So we then set them up with our operations team in Boston. This is even before we invested, because they weren't quite there yet where we could see, can they turn this cool technology into something useful. So the Boston operations team, sat with them for, they'd come in and display the stuff, and the Boston ops team said, well, can you do this? Can you do that? And then they go back and redo the product and come back again, like every week for about 4 months. And they developed an aviation product with us, and at that point we then invested in them, which then puts that stamp of approval. And since then they have deployed with several airlines around the world, including some of our competitors. But they're also able to they work with Major League Baseball. They're getting into the insurance market, agriculture. It's like huge, because to having that micro weather is very, very valuable. Now, we're in the process of helping them work through becoming an official weather provider for dispatch purposes, which you would know as a pilot. It's a slightly different type of process.
Which
But
is the
once
big
that
leagues.
happens, it can be used for that. But if you think about, because the path we see the future, this kind of leads into some of the other work that you're doing, is if you're flying an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft from the top of one building in downtown San Jose to the top of another building in San Francisco, what's the weather on those in that area? And so Climatecell will be very, very incredibly valuable for for the eVTOL urban air mobility industry.
And if we could just maybe shift a bit further into aviation and the airframes themselves, you're making some plays into advanced technology aircraft. And we know on the airline side there is this enormous pressure to become carbon neutral, and that's not to mention the flight shaming movement that's starting in Europe. When you sit back and you evaluate a potential investment in some of this advanced technology, do you worry that the certification processes that we have right now might not be able to keep up with either the business model of the aircraft manufacturer or your goals as an investor?
Well, see, when we invest early on, and we're minority investment, so we're not deploying a huge amount of money, but we always require, as part of the investment, that we have either a board seat or a board observer, and there's some technicalities in the difference, but the point is we have a seat at the table. And our investments are more meant to A lot of it can be market intelligence. Will there be a huge financial exit on the end? I mean, like I said, we're doing quite well on that area, but that's not the main point. The main point is seeing how the industry will change, making sure that we're on the leading edge of all of that, and also to help the bottom line at JetBlue. Like Climatecell, our investment in Climatecell, if we're able to reduce delays dramatically, that impacts the bottom line real time, far more than any investment or investment return that we would have. So I think about the future and some of the investments that we've made on the aviation side. We look at the two general trends that we think are going to dramatically impact the aviation industry, and that's would be electric, electrification, if you will, and urban air mobility in the terms of eVTOLs. And I'll get into both of those in a second. But if we think of it, why were we looking in this space? What are we looking? What does trends matter? Well, if you were you were on the board of Ford or GM or Toyota or any of the big auto makers, and you heard about this little company called in 2009, called Uber, and they were gonna let strangers ride in personal cars, you'd think that was crazy. And what would that have to do with you? Well, that entire industry now, Uber and Lyft and all the others around the world, have dramatically changed the auto industry because people aren't buying cars as much because they have this access to mobility. Same thing then with Airbnb in the hospitality industry. If you were on the board of Hyatt or Hilton, you would have thought, like, who's this little startup called Airbnb that's
yeah, who are these guys? Yeah,
strangers in your house. But now Airbnb is worth more than the hotel companies. So the question is, what's going to happen to airlines? Are airlines going to be impacted by startups? That is part of our thesis of why we set up JetBlue Technology Ventures. We want to know what's happening before it happens. And so our thesis, and where we've kind of landed on, is that airlines as we know them today, in the U.S. they're called 121 Airlines. That's part of the name, by the name, as you know, of the Federal Aviation Regulations of
scheduled air traffic.
Yeah, you'll still go to San Francisco to fly to New York or San Francisco to fly to London. So major airlines will still exist. But we believe that short-haul travel, so regional travel, call it 700 miles and less, will dramatically change. And so and that's where, and the reason is because of the rise of electrification. And we can say it's because of sustainability, but really in the end, the economics of electric propulsion are phenomenal. Now, interesting, getting back to those same regulations, I look at it as when aircraft were first developed, they were piston engines with propellers. And then a big thing came along where you had turbine engines and jets, and that jet age, if you will. Well, the regulations had to change because the regulations only were how do you certify propeller airplanes with piston engines, and all of a sudden you had jet engines. Well, that changed the regulations. Well, guess what? Up until about 3 years ago, there was no way to certify electric aircraft. And now there is. So there is and so that evolution is changing, and each one is a little bit of a one-off still. But in the FAA at EASA in Europe and some of the other regulatory agencies around the world realize that electrification of the aviation industry is happening, and they need to develop the regulations for it. So we have a seat at the table at the leading edge at a startup that is ahead of all the others around the world in eVTOL, so electric vertical takeoff and landing. So the batteries.
Would that be Joby?
That would be Joby.
Okay.
Would be Joby, and they are ahead of everyone, and they're in the certification process now. So that gives us a seat at the table at this of the industry at the convergence of electrification and vertical takeoff and landing, urban air mobility. So we know what's happening because we literally have the seat at the table. And so that's why we do some of these investing. And when you think about purchasing aircraft, for an airline to purchase aircraft, your order book is goes 10 years out in the future. And really it does inform as we think about, should we be purchasing aircraft that are for short haul? Or should we be thinking about aircraft that are for longer haul? And if you look at the JetBlue order book now, and it's evolving, and we've moved away from our current fleet, which was an Embraer 190, into the Airbus 220, which has longer range. And, there's a piece and an element of the work that we've been doing that helped inform some of that.
One of the things, Bonnie, I find really fascinating about your investment in Joby is that to an outside observer like me, it looks like you're taking sides on the great divisive debate right now of should these vehicles be powered through hybrid power plants or should it be an all-electric vehicle? Are you, by putting your money in Joby, saying we've made up our mind and we fall on the electric side, or do you think there's still room for the hybrid vehicles out there?
Well, what again, I'm saying, what is the point of our investment? The point of our investment is we believe electrification is going to transform the aviation industry, and so by having a seat at the table and making this investment, we're able to follow those trends. And yeah, we do look at, we see the hybrid as well. But if you think about why do current? I mean, you can currently take off. Well, it used to be when there were vertiports before they decertified a lot of them. You could have taken off on the rooftop of a building in San Jose, California, and go to San Francisco. I say that because literally our offices are between San Jose and San Francisco, and there's a lot of traffic there. So you could have taken off on a helicopter from San Jose and get to San Francisco and land on top of a building. Why can't you now? Well, there's a couple of very important reasons. One is it's very, very, very expensive because the parts and certification of a helicopter, because there's so many single points of failure. I think the last, when we were looking into it, 52 single points of failure. You need to make sure that everything from the rotor blade to the, drive shaft and all of these things is all of that. They have to have a lot of maintenance on them. So there's a very, very high cost to it. Second of all, there's the fuel burn, and to keep a vehicle hovering in the air, not using the forces of lift to keep it like an airplane does, uses a lot of power. So it uses a lot of fuel. And then they are very, very noisy. And that is the reason primarily why urban areas will not allow helicopters into the area, because they're so noisy. Well, what when I think of Joby, it was so an electric, and the thing is flying, the vehicle's flying, and I've listened to it, and it truly is unbelievably quiet. And so that noise is not going to be an issue. Now, if you use a hybrid, you could have some of those same noise issues. Now, I'm not, and there's the weight issue too, right? Because if you have a hybrid, you're going to have additional weight because you have both the generator or however you think of the hybrid side of it, or another engine. Does that mean that the hybrid isn't going to work? No, there's a possibility it will. It allows us, though, to see the evolution of both. And I think where we land on is we're looking, and why we've chosen Joby is because their design reduces cost, enhances safety. There's no single points of failure whatsoever, and it's not noisy. So this is sort of cost, safety, and noise.
Bonnie, one of the things I'd like to do, noticing that our time will be coming to an end here shortly, I have to ask you on the issue of urban air mobility a pilot question. So I hope you don't mind that.
No, not at all.
And I want to end the show talking about your portfolio around passenger services, because there are a couple of interesting tidbits that come out as I look across the companies you invest in. But when we talk about urban air mobility, the next words usually out of the sales pitches, it's an optionally piloted vehicle. And certainly up front, as the FAA gains experience with UAM, as we get experience with the airframe life, the durability, there's going to be a pilot up front. And so I'm just wondering, if there is this huge push for urban air mobility, doesn't that exacerbate the problem that a company like JetBlue or United or Delta would have, just putting pilots in the cockpit? Because now we've got a whole different group of pilots that we need to have, going from my house to your office, so to speak.
Yeah, so one of the reasons, again, we very much focus on safety. JetBlue, if we're going to put JetBlue's name on something, we have to be thinking about that. And so, even though JetBlue Technology Ventures is a separate entity, it still has a JetBlue name, and we're still funded by JetBlue. And so, safety, which is our number one value, is incredibly important. Yes, there are eVTOLs out there that are building on a business model of pilot optional. Um, we believe that while technologically that is most certainly quite possible and achievable. EHang is one of them out of China. Just like it's, the Tesla can do an automated vehicle right now on the freeway, and we see the, vehicle autonomy on the ground getting there. But and quite frankly, most of the accidents that happen on the ground and most of the accidents that happen in the air have human error, which when you use pilot optional, that reduces that human error. But there's a whole public adoption piece that is that will take so much longer, and regulation. I mean, the FAA is certainly not going to certify eVTOL, a pilotless eVTOL in the United States anytime soon. And why wait for that adoption curve to happen 10 years from now or more? The startup would fail by then. And so it's better to enter a market as piloted. And then there's this, the same question that, again, the ground-based vehicles have the same question, that the human element, what does a human bring to the table? There are things that the human value system, think of a car, something happens and a kid runs out on the street, and on the other side is an old lady, and you're going to have to hit one of them. Which one does it hit? Or if the motors fail or an engine fails on an airplane, do you land on the freeway or do you land in the school playground or field where there's a couple of kids? There's those moral decisions of what to do, and that's a human-based decision. We do not see that happening. Pilot optional, call it autonomy. Although technologically it can happen, I don't think public adoption or regulation will allow it for a very long time. So that means then, of course, you need to rely on pilots. And we all know that as a pilot, and for those in the general public, there's a pilot shortage even right now. So the industry is having a hard time filling the cockpits of pilots as it stands. So now you're going to add a need for another 10,000 pilots to fly eVTOLs around. How is that going to work? Well, actually, and this is one of the things that I've just found fascinating, the eVTOL space can actually help accelerate and build a pilot pipeline, because with the exact regulations as they are now, flying an eVTOL is actually less complex than flying, an airline for JetBlue or United or anything else. And so the regulations do allow for them to be flying at 500 hours versus the 1,500 hours. So that is currently what, if you're going to take a charter aircraft, you operate in these in the regulation exactly as it is now. And this is how you build experience. So it is a great place to build a pilot pipeline, and the vehicles are cheaper to operate. So part of the reasons becoming a pilot is so expensive is you have to get 4 years of experience in gas-powered piston engine aircraft that just take a lot of very expensive. So this actually builds a really very nice pipeline for the industry. So because they are single piloted, the pay for these pilots will be above where it is now for some of the regional pilots. So I think that's good for the pilot industry as well. So yeah, we're very bullish on it, and it actually can be a solution for the pilot shortage as opposed to a problem for it.
Bonnie, the last thing I want to talk to you about is your extensive portfolio in passenger service offerings. There are a number of companies that you've invested in, as you know, that focus on the passenger experience, focus on passenger data processing. And I'm just wondering, as an outside investor, and you scratch your head, I certainly understand you have JetBlue to worry about. But when you ask yourself the question, why aren't some of these capabilities being organically developed within these big airlines that have a 100-year history of moving people? Why do you think that the airline industry, particularly in passenger service, has I guess not a extensive track record in innovating, some of their day-to-day business processes.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, the airline industry always has been and probably always will be a fairly low margin. I mean, when it's not it's an industry that does bring in a lot of money with airfares, but it goes right back out the tailpipe in terms of fuel and everything else. And so there's not a lot of room on any airline's balance sheet to develop things internally that are not going to show an immediate return. If you're going to see a payback in 2 years, sure, then a company will develop that. And there are some that are working on and including JetBlue. We do a lot of cool stuff internally, but it needs to show a pretty quick payback. Whereas if you do investing, you're investing funds that as a small amount, it's a different part of, in part it's a different part of the balance sheet, but also we don't have to do the entire cost. Like I said, we are minority investors. Call it anywhere from 1 to 5% of a company, and so we're not having to cover the whole cost of developing whatever it is they're developing. We're only, they're taking our money, the 1% to 5%, and they're taking a bunch of money from other places to help build this cool stuff. And so it's a really, really low cost way for us to explore and quite frankly have a research and development division that is not internal. And we don't waste money on things that are going to take a 10-year payback, and we have to pay the 100% of the cost of it. We're investing 1 to 5%, and by the way, if it's successful and they start selling it to the rest of the industry, it will pay back much more than that. So it's a model that allows us to remain innovative without having to burn internal funds on research and development that it's going to take a long time to pay off.
Bonnie, with that in mind, as you look across not only your portfolio, but the portfolios of your competitors out there, are you convinced that there's a way yet where you can associate and measure an investment against the amount of market share it can conceivably bring to an airline? Is that correlation been developed yet, or are we still in the infancy of venture investing as it applies to commercial aviation?
Well, I mean, a lot of the we have sort of three different horizons of things that we invest in, things that are relevant to JetBlue within the next 2 years. And those are, things like Climatecell, Lumo, some of these other things that we've invested in that where the value will come to the airline is to the bottom line is either an increased revenue, decreased cost, improved customer service, or enhanced safety. So those four things, which any airline measures, and so that is something that's relevant to JetBlue right now, and that's about 30% of what we invest in. 70% is a little beyond the horizon, so it's beyond the existing operations, and we're very focused on. JetBlue has another subsidiary, our sister subsidiary, called JetBlue Travel Products, which is on the surface for the general public, think of it as JetBlue Vacations, right? It's the end-to-end experience from the moment you think about travel till you come back, and it's the entire package. But how do we optimize the experience from the connections, the handoff from the airline to the hotel to the car to the ground transportation, all of those things? Where does an eVTOL fit in? And so that total available market, if you will, it expands from just airlines to a much broader travel industry. And so when we think about the investments and the return and the total available market, these brand extensions, where might Joby fit into this? It's still too early to say. So we look on each investment on a case by case basis. But as you build out a portfolio, if you come back to an interview me in 4 years, our portfolio will have 50 companies. You'll see that broad spectrum, and some of the portfolio companies will kind of roll up together into certain themes. An area we're very focused on right now, we've made several investments in the space, is around the data, and is around how do we think about curating good offerings to our customers while also respecting privacy. So managing that through, and several of our startups will help us think through that. So in a broad sense, we cover the full spectrum. It's not something like a one-size-fits-all, hey, this is going to bring X amount of money to JetBlue, or this total of market, or this is going to change the industry this way. It's all through several different ways.
Well, Bonnie, on that word, I want to say this has been an absolutely fabulous conversation. I am getting into your schedule, and we're going to talk again in 5 years. And maybe this will be over video.
Okay.
And I want to again thank you so much, and I wish you much success.
Thank you.